What up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Ask Paul. My name is Paul Abernathy, your host. Welcome to the podcast where we answer all your pressing electrical questions. And if you do got questions, guess what? All you got to do is go to paulabernathy.com and put your name in, put your email address in, and put in your question. Then click that submit button. Then it comes to me, and I will answer your electrical question. Now, maybe it's code related, maybe it's business electrical contracting related, whatever it may be, please feel free to go to the website and submit your question. That's what we created it for. Now, that service, Let's Ask Paul, and the Ask Paul portal is all sponsored by Electrical Code Academy Incorporated. Now, that's a corporation located in Texas, and we provide electrical education for exam preparation, as well as post-licensing. For example, getting a better, deeper, deep dive understanding of residential, commercial, industrial, grounding and bonding, and even electrical theory. So we have a fast-track program tailored for whatever you need. But if you're preparing for an electrical exam, then you want the black program. If you're newly licensed or you're out there working in the trade and you want to get a deeper understanding, make your life a little easier in residential, then we got the Fast Tracks Red program. Same for commercial, we have the Fast Tracks Green program. If you are transitioning to industrial wiring, then we have the Fast Tracks Blue program. And of course, overall grounding and bonding. If you really want to really get a deep understanding of grounding and bonding, then you want our Purple program. And then of course, if you're just dying to learn all you want to learn about AC/DC theory, transformers, single phase, three phase, motors, all that kind of stuff, parallels and series and all that, then you want to look at our Yellow program. Okay. So we have a bunch of Fast Tracks programs. Just go to electricalcodeacademy.net or .org or .com. It doesn't really matter. You can also go to fasttracksystem.com and it'll get you straight to the black program if you're looking for exam preparation. And that's what we specialize in, is preparing you for an electrical exam. But I like to think it's more preparing you for life in the trade. That's what it's really all about. So check that out. We have a lot of students in that program that aren't preparing for an exam, by the way. They're just in there because it takes a really good look at the National Electrical Code and kind of rounds you out and tests your ability to do calcs and do you understand the calculations? But also remember, with all of these programs, you get access to Wednesday night sessions. And that is a session where I am live and you can ask me any question you want. We'll go into the program. We'll look at a unit that you might not understand and I'll clarify. All that's available to you. Plus I record them all. So they're all available afterwards. So you can go back and watch them if you happen to miss one or so. So all of that's available to you as a Fast Track student. But don't forget that we also have a monthly subscription program that you can get to all of our exclusive videos, exclusive podcasts. That's over on electricalcodeacademy.net as well. You'll see up there for subscriptions, simply $9.99 a month. And you get access to the multi-hour series on swimming pools that I did with Vince Delacroix. And you also get access to the 12-hour grounding and bonding webinar that I did, and much, much, much more. So check that out, $9.99 a month. You can cancel at any time. It's up to you. Most of the people in that do it to support us. But you know what? It's right there. You can get all the knowledge you want on all different types of topics. And you can get through the BS because there's no commercials, no advertising. All that stuff has been removed. So that's the beauty of that. Okay, enough of the commercial plugs. Today's episode, we're going to be answering a question that was submitted. And so let's get to it. That's what this is all about. It says, Paul, do 3-gang and larger boxes need to be braced, supported on both sides? If so, how do you fasten the boxes if they don't have any holes for fastening on the second side? Thank you. Okay, good question. And I'll kind of do it this way. Remember, a manufacturer that makes the box is always a great place to start. Don't shy away from reaching out to these folks. You know, most people know that I work for a wire and cable manufacturer. And, you know, as simple as wire and cable is, people have questions. And we want your questions. That's what I created our codes and standards department at Encore, to be able to answer those questions for people. And so that's why it was created. Now, I can tell you right now, the manufacturers of all the different types of boxes that you buy, whether it's the Rayco from AB&B or I don't know, whatever the different brands are, and I'm drawing a blank with all the different brands, you know that you can reach out to them and ask them. They know better about their product than anybody. In fact, I can tell you more about wire and cable than it would be to just ask somebody else, because I deal in that every day, right? Now, that's something to think about first, is using your manufacturer as a resource. So most boxes, if they require a bracket, will come with the bracket. Now, if you buy a 2-gang box, the nails on the side, plastic nail up, whatnot, that's adequate. That's fine. It's rigidly supported, fastened in place. It's not going anywhere. It's designed for that application. It's already done. Usually the same for a 3-gang box. Now, when you get to a 4-gang nail up or even a 5-gang nail up, if I've been a while since I've seen a 5-gang nail up, plastic anyway. I don't know that I have seen a 5-gang. I've seen a 4. Usually I wouldn't put that many switches in one location, at least residentially wise. When we went to metal boxes and we had gangable boxes, and that was a different story. But anyway, typically the boxes that are more than 3-gang will have a built-in bracket, or it'll have a way on the other side to secure it. Even 3-gang nail-ups have a little tab on the right, usually to put a screw through, that you'll put through to help secure it in place. That's really to keep it from pushing back in the wall, to be honest with you, because it's a really long box. Trust me, it's going to be already secured by those nails on the side. Now, when you're getting into bigger boxes, bigger metal boxes, typically a lot of the bigger boxes might be like a surface mount box. So then we have to figure, you can get a box. Not all boxes are listed, right? Floor box is obviously listed floor box, but not all boxes are listed. There's no requirement in 314 for all boxes to be listed. Specialty boxes, absolutely. But all boxes, no. So if I were to create a wireway box, okay, it's enclosure, and I created it and it has no holes in it, it's expected for me to drill the necessary holes to be able to put it on Kindorf, or if I'm going to lag it to the wall or do something, then I need to secure it, and it needs to be rigidly secured to the structure. You with me? Now, if the box is designed to be supported by braces or something else, then typically the manufacturer is going to provide that or give you guidance on that, right? But I've done some really big junction boxes for some big pulls, and these boxes come with no holes in them. So typically you drill your holes and you would put the securing mechanism necessary, whether they're toggles or whether or not you're going to hook them to a Kindorf, or you're going to put anchors, whatever you're going to do, you're expected to do that with that box. Now, listed boxes, floor boxes are going to have everything it's necessary. It gives you everything to secure it. So with fan boxes, for example, yeah, they're going to tell you to support the fan, how you do it. The screws are going to typically come with it, screw into the framing members. It's going to support the weight. It's designed for that. So again, nail ups, usually that's going to take care of itself. Gangable singles, like the metal gangable singles device boxes, when you start getting quite a few in there, then you're going to have to either stub out the 2x4s from one of the sides of the 2x4 wall in order to come out, in order to be able to have the other side of a multi-gang box to be able to secure to, so it's rigidly in place, right? So again, that's something that you need to do, and you need to look at each one, because the key here is that it has to be rigidly supported, okay? It needs to be rigidly and securely fastened. Now, where do we get all this language? Keep talking about these languages. 314.23 is labeled supports. And of course, 314 article is outlet, device, pull, and junction boxes, conduit body fittings, and handhold. So here you'll see that .23, which is section 23, will go through and talk about surface mounting, structural mounting. That's with nails and screws and braces. Then you got mounting and finished surface. Those type of things with, like the wings that pop out, those type of scenarios. And then, of course, you have suspended ceiling requirements and supporting with wire and all those type of things. So you really have to look at the box. And if it's a big box and you have to drill holes to be able to add securement to it, then it's okay to do that. But we have to be careful with that because there are rules that expose threads and all that. And just because you want a 3-gang box and you think it needs a little more support and you go drilling a screw through it, you got to be very careful in what you do to the box. Okay. Typically, again, those smaller boxes, the securing mechanism is going to come with it. It's only when you start getting these gangables, and then they do make brackets. And a lot of times in commercial buildings, we'll see these gangables, and it's a metal strip that goes between the framing members, and these boxes will screw to this strip that goes across there. Not because any specific strip is required, right? It's because you need to securely fasten those boxes so they're rigid and securely fastened in place. And so a lot of those use those little brackets, metal brackets that go across there. The one thing I'll tell you is that if you're going to use gangables like that, the gangable metal boxes, the gangable metal device boxes, where you take off one side and they gang, just ask your supply house and they'll have the brackets that go between the studs. And usually those are, more often than not, when I see them, they're in metal stud frame construction. And those brackets are perfectly, they can screw from stud to stud. And these boxes, you screw through the back of these boxes straight into that bracket, and it holds it in place, that type of thing. But again, you have different types of enclosures. Like I said, wireways, big junction boxes that might come with no holes. You're going to have to drill holes where necessary. You're going to have to securely mount it. And that's just something you're going to have to do. You're going to have to make that call as the electrician. Okay. But what the code tells you is that they do have to be securely fastened, rigidly supported. If you do that and you're happy with that and it looks rigidly supported, then I don't think any inspector is going to give you any grief over that application at all. Okay. So that makes sense. Hopefully that answered that question. And if not, you know what I always say, if I miss the mark, hey, I'm only human. And you can always do a follow-up. Just say who you are and you're doing a follow-up to a previous question and ask for more clarity. And you know what? I promise you, we will follow up with it. I guarantee you. So don't worry. We will definitely do that for you. All right, let's go on to another question. Okay, this one says, Dear Paul, I hate to ask this question again, but is a strap required between two enclosures where the EMT is only 3 feet long? Thanks in advance. Okay, well, again, I kind of feel like this is a plant question. But I will stick with the same thing I have stuck with since the beginning. And I will answer this question the same as I have. And the same as recently I posted a link from Russ LeBlanc. I think it's Blanc, whatever. He's with he writes for EC&M magazine. And he did an article this past year on this same exact subject. The issue was for EMT, for example, and that's what we'll use, is for EMT, since he brought up the 3 feet and whatnot. So he was like, some people seem to think there needs to be a strap in there. And, this caused quite a few arguments over this. I might have said some nasty things about somebody following the coat steps of their father, and I apologize for that comment. That was just me being mad at somebody else. Who that person was associating with, and I believe they could pick better people to associate with. So again, I apologize to the gentleman that I made that comment about. You did your own thing. You did not follow the coat steps of your father. It's just me being nasty, and I apologize. I did not mean anything by it. You're an educator that brings a lot to the industry. So I apologize for that, but I don't apologize to your little nitwit friend who doesn't have a clue. Okay. Who copies everybody else when they try to do a podcast instead of doing anything original on their own. They want to ride the coattails of everybody else, and then they call up everybody else trying to befriend them so they can gang up on people. That is a weasel. So again, I don't apologize to that individual, and he knows who he is, but I do apologize to the junior for saying that he followed in the coattails of the senior. Senior was a great man, and I'm not taking anything away from junior. Again, I apologize, said that out of anger. I am the bigger man. Again, I apologize for that. Although I still believe that both of you's interpretation of this is totally wrong And it was backed up by Russ's article in EC&M magazine, which I'll remind you always gets quality checked by other people, because I've submitted documents to that publication and they always check with other people, other educators, other publishers. And I'm telling you right now, you do not need a separate strap between two enclosures when a piece of EMT is 3 feet long with connectors on the end that are secured to the box. The sheer notion that you would need anything else is pure lunacy. Pure lunacy. But to clarify, and I do recommend you go read that article. And if I can find it, I will post that article down in the link to this podcast. It is a great article. Russ did it. It is really great. I agree 100% with it. But here's the concept here. Here's what the code says. Support. It says 358.30, securing and supporting. So I'm answering this question. It says EMT shall be installed as a complete system in accordance with 300.18 and shall be securely fastened in place and supported in accordance with 358.30 A and B. Now, A says securely fastened. It says EMT shall be securely fastened in place at intervals not to exceed 10 feet. In addition, each EMT run between termination points shall be securely fastened within 3 feet of each outlet box, junction box, device box, cabinet, conduit body, and the other tubing termination. Now, I will tell you, these fittings, when they're on the EMT and you secure them down, you have to go look at the listing of the fitting. It is securing that EMT. It is secured to the box. It is not going anywhere. Now, somebody would like you to think the semantics of when it says shall be secured and fastened within 3 feet. That is, they're trying to, do they really think that they want to jump off this little cliff and tell electricians out there that they should have a strap on a 3-foot piece of EMT between cabinets? Think about that. Think about the lunacy that it's not going anywhere. What's the notion of a support to support the raceway? Last I checked, a 3-foot piece of EMT, which is now, by the way, rated for severe to handle physical damage, is not going to be drooping. It's not going anywhere. It's securely fastened in place at each end with the fitting. So they'd like you to think about these little semantics, but it's just, look, we're here to teach electricians and we're here to explain the code. Now, Russ did a really good job of detailing this. So again, I will try to find the link and put it down in the description for you to go read that article. You might have to subscribe to EC&M magazine, which is a great magazine anyway. But you definitely want to read that article because he, piece by piece, pointed out how when you use the fittings in association with the EMT, that it is secured. And to be honest with you, the EMT goes into the fitting. So if I want to get into the semantics, the fitting actually overlaps the EMT. So when you secure it with the set screw or whatever, it is actually secured and it provides the support within 3 feet. It's actually a 3-foot piece of EMT. The fittings will go over it and come in about an inch. So either way they were to try to paint a willy-nilly picture. And let me remind you, there's a lot of educators out there who they would be wrong with, because Russ, for example, is very well known when it comes to the EC&M and his publications that come out, that he went piece by piece and said how he thought it was totally fine. I agree with him. And there's many other educators that also do as well. So that started this whole thing. And then so it turned whatever it went. Who cares? But to answer your question, it does not require any additional. Now, if you go back and do the history, I have a show that I did that I went back and looked at the history. So people want to look at and say, oh, in 2008, this, but it was removed in 2011 and it's never been placed back because it was misguided and unnecessary. So we're on the right track now. It doesn't require any, and it's not going anywhere. And so pretty straightforward. But again, I'll put the link to the article below and let you be the judge. But Russ did a great job breaking it down piece by piece, and I agree 100%. So hopefully that answers your question. No, if it's 3 foot between enclosures and it's got the listed fittings on the end on the actual EMT based on the listings of those fittings, and it is connected to that EMT, it's connected to the enclosures, then it's done. It's supported, it's secured. No other strap is necessary. If you don't agree with that, then you go out and buy yourself a strap. Have at it if you want. All right, so hopefully that answered that question and cleared that up. All right, let's see. Do we have another one? Yeah, I think we have another one that was submitted. Let's see here. It says, okay, I got it. It says, Dear Paul, when transitioning between PVC Schedule 40 or 80 to HDPE conduit, how do I make that transition? Thanks in advance. Okay, so that was a short one, and so I'll do my best here. So first things first. There are specific transition fittings that are available, but they're more mechanical that would allow you to go from HDPE to PVC, right? So there is more mechanical ways to do that, to be able to do that. Now, when you go from HDPE to HDPE, there's mechanicals ways to do it. There's heat fusion, there's electrofusion, all those type of ways to go from one stick to another, then connect the joint ends. But when you're making a transition, then it gets to be more difficult when you might be transitioning from HDPE over to PVC, and it happens. So how do you make that transition? Well, they make fittings that are mechanical, that are going to mechanically mate these two together. But one of the things that are out there is that what you don't see in 353.48, and I'm going to read it, but what you see as an informational note is just that. It's just information. But I want to read it to you because this is what you should be using as an AHJ. And this is 353.48 joints. It says, all joints between lengths of conduit and between conduit and couplings, fittings and boxes shall be made by an approved method. Okay? So what is approved method? Well, the approved method is whatever the AHJ is okay with. Now, informational note says HDPE conduit can be joined using either heat fusion, electrofusion, or mechanical fittings. Now, that's informational note. That is by no means all of the methods available. In fact, a company that makes a product that does chemical fusion, which is similar to what you'd see with PVC glue, PVC cement, whatnot, they make that, and it's called polywater, and they make a product called Bonduit. And it's a product that transitions, and they have a test that's out there that they did, independent tests, that actually their process will actually mate HDPE to PVC. And it actually is more pull strength. If you look at the data, it far exceeds what you would get from a mechanical. And it's available. You can get it from them. You can get their information from them. So if you're trying to transition from an HDPE to a PVC transition, remember, there are some listed transitions out there that do this mechanically wise, but there are the ability to do it with a chemical fusion, which is basically like PVC cement type thing, but it's designed to mate both HDPE and PVC, which typically don't mate very well when it comes to normal, like a PVC glue, because you want to have that seal. So check them out. It's Polywater. It's a product called Bonduit, and give that a look. And it's designed specifically for this transition. And it's very common to see this type of transition to take place. All right. Now, the other thing about it is joints. Notice that .6, which is synonymous with the listing requirements for most all of the wiring methods, it says HDPE conduit and associated fittings shall be listed. Absolutely. Now, a transition fitting is either listed PVC or it's listed HDPE. It's typically you're not going to have couplings for HDPE. You're going to have heat fusion, electrofusion. You can have mechanical ones, which do get a listing, that transition and connect different pieces of HDPE together. But when it transitions from HDPE to a PVC material, then that is a little harder beast to find. Even though there's some mechanical ones available, I just want you to give a look at the Bonduit. And again, no sales plug here. They're not sponsoring anything, but they do have a chemical bond that does very well, and they'll give you the documents that are available that can make that transition. Now, in the 2020 NEC, where it says made by an approved method, that kind of takes it to the next level, because we're not talking about an HDPE fitting that goes from HDPE to HDPE. We're talking about something from HDPE that goes over to like a PVC. Now, that is something that the AHJ will approve, and they can use the documents that come from manufacturers that specifically make these products for that transition. Okay, that's a transition type of, and it's not even a fitting. The way that these go together, it actually uses a PVC coupling to make that transition, because the ODs are the same. If it's trade size 3, it's trade size 3. There's no different, but it's designed to use a standard PVC coupling, which is a listed coupling, which is listed with PVC, both listed products, but it's designed to mate with HDPE using this chemical bond. Okay, so in the 2023 code, we try to clear this up a little bit to realize that when it says approved means, then it's okay, because this is a transition fitting. It's okay if a manufacturer makes something specific for this type of thing. And it just happens that Polywater does, and they call it a Bonduit, and they'll give you the coupling and everything necessary in order to make this transition. But you should be able to use any coupling that's PVC for the kind of raceway that you're transitioning to from an HDPE. The difference is a mechanical one can break down. A chemical fusion is almost like having the heat fusion or electrofusion, means it mates these two pieces chemically and they bond, and it just becomes super, super strong. And that's what I would want in a transition. So there's many different ways to do that, but I'm going to tell you to go check them out at Polywater. Check out that Bonduit. It does say right here, made by an approved method. So to me, that's an approved method that the AHJ can clearly give the okay. All you got to do is provide the information from the manufacturer stating how to do it, what the instructions are, what you're using, and that it's perfectly acceptable. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question when it comes to your transition between HDPE and PVC, which does happen. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Let's do another one. I'm feeling like I should do more. So let's do another one. Okay, this one says, Dear Paul, can you please explain the large equipment requirement for entrance and egress from working spaces? I'm confused with the requirements of the entrance and egress to the working space with the dedicated equipment space. Thanks in advance. Okay, good question. Well, let's kind of try to separate the two really quickly. So working clearance is going to be under Part 2 of 110, and that is, well, actually both of these are under Part 2 of 110. So 110.26 deals with the working space. Okay, and it's broken down into the working space. So you have the depth of the working space, you have the width of the working space, you have the height of the working space. All of that is covered in 110.26, A, 1, 2, and 3. And of course, you have limited area space. That's item number 4. And that came from old duct heater space back in 424. It got moved up into, I guess it's 2017 cycle, got added here. That's to allow you knowing that you can't meet the normal rules maybe for the height of the working space, but as long as you have the height for the equipment, then you can get it in there. That would be like in crawl spaces or above suspended ceilings, things like that. Well, then you can, as long as you have the height for the equipment, you're still going to have the depth of the working space, the clearance left to right. You're still going to have all that, but we're going to cut you a break when it comes to the height, right? So that's the working space requirements. And I think we have a podcast or a video that really talks about all the issues with the dedicated working space. In fact, I think over in my videos, and again, the videos that are monthly subscription only, I think part of my analysis of the 2020 NEC, I went pretty deep in 110.26. Okay, so check that out if you're a monthly subscriber. I don't know if you are or not, the one who submitted the question, but go check that out because there's some great videos in there. I didn't finish all of 2020, but I got pretty good up into 2020. So, but I know that is in there. So go check that out. That's a really, really good video, especially to get a better understanding all of 110. Okay. All right. So, but then let me shift to your question, because your question now really moves to when we're dealing with larger equipment and the working space requirement and how big whether or not you have two entrances or not to get in there. Still got your working space, still got that requirement in front of this equipment. Okay. Still have all that. But your question seems like it's asking me more about how about the egress to and entrance and egress from, or entrance to and egress from. What is required there? So I want to draw your attention to 110.26, and we're going to be looking at C. The C is entrance to and egress from the working space. So we've established the working space, and we did that in 110.26, right? So now we're going to be talking about large equipment. Now, C1 says a minimum required. So this is a minimum. It says at least one entrance of sufficient area shall be provided to give access to and egress from working space about the electrical equipment. So absolutely. So at the minimum, I have to have the ability to get in and get out of the working space. So I can't have anything that would hinder my ability to get out of this working space. Again, the working space is established already in 110.26. A1, 2, 3, and 4 were applicable, of course. So we've established that. This is only saying, look, I need to be able to get in and out of there. Now, that's a minimum requirement. Now, what about if it's large equipment? Now, what constitutes large equipment? Well, here's what the code says, and we're at C2. It says, for large equipment that contain overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices, and that's important to remember, folks. So when we're talking about this large equipment, it says it has to contain overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices. If it doesn't have either of those things, then you do not have to worry about this large equipment requirement. That's important. Okay, so for large equipment that contain overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices, it says there shall be one entrance to and egress from the required working space not less than 24 inches wide and 6.5 feet high at each end of the working space. Okay, so if you imagine a piece of switchgear and you've got this working space that's coming out from it, and let's just assume that it's 480 volts. And of course, the table in 110.26A1, for example, is nominal voltage to ground. So it's a 480 volt system. So let's just say it's pure 480 volt. And so then it would be 480 volt to ground. But remembering if it was a 277 480, then it would be 277 to ground. But in our example, we'll say it's pure 480 volt switchgear. So it'd be 480 to ground. And you go to that and you look and see that 151 through 600, depending on whether it's condition 1, 2, or 3. And if you're following along, I'm at table 110.26A1, by the way. I'm trying to set the stage here. So in this case, let's just say it's condition 1, exposed live parts on one side, but not on the other side. Then you have 3 foot clearance. So I have to have 3 foot in front of it. That would be the width of the equipment, right? So it'd be what? If you typically look at the rules, it's 30 inches wide or greater if the equipment's greater. So let's say it's switchgear, so it's greater than 30 inches, how wide it is, say 6 feet wide, I guess. And it out 3 feet. That is your working space. You with me? Okay, that's for you. That's for the electrician. That's for me to safely work on this piece of equipment. Okay, now we're going to go back. So that's in a room. So in this room, I need to have at least a door entrance that measures 24 inches wide by 6.5 feet at each end of this workspace. Now, that's setting the stage, but now it says this requirement shall apply to either of the following conditions. So it states that, but it doesn't say that's always the case, because number 1 said a minimum requirement. You have to have access to and egress from the working space. I get you. But when it comes to large equipment, and it's going to set the tone here because you got 2 issues here you got to deal with. It's saying, okay, if the equipment is large, and we're going to tell you what large is, by the way, in a second. But in doing so, I need to have a opening that is 24 wide by 6.5 feet high at each end of this working space. And remember, this working space comes out from the switchgear 3 feet and it goes 6 feet wide. Okay. It's kind of the footprint of the equipment, straight from it out 3 feet and then the width of the equipment. Now here's what it says. For equipment rated 1200 amperes or more and over 6 feet wide. Okay, now this is going to apply to all equipment, whether it's a feeder, switchgear, whatever it be. This is applying to all of that equipment that contains what? Overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices. Okay, switchgears, switchboards, motor control centers, all those type of things have those type of things in them. So I'm going to have that clearance, right? So this applies broadly, but the trigger is it has to be rated 1200 amperes or more and 6 feet wide. Okay, so that's the first one. And if that's the case, and that's what we're dealing with, then I have to have an entrance and egress on either end of the working space. Okay, now the second condition only applies to service disconnecting means. So here's what it says. This is number 2. It says, and this is C2.2. It says, for service disconnecting means installed in accordance with 230.71, and this allows you to have 6 different disconnects grouped in one location, right? It says where the combined ampere rating is 1200 amperes or more and over 6 feet wide. So the reason that this says service disconnecting means is this rule only applies to service disconnects. Now let me tell you how this came about. So what happens is you have a building that has a switchgear room and then the service equipment's in there. In the past, it was, again, 1200 amperes would have been the trigger and 6 feet wide. Well, what if I had 2 800 amp pieces of switchgear together were over 1200 amps, but individually were only 800 amps? Well, then the rule wouldn't have applied to have it considered large equipment and have an entrance and egress at each end of that working space. That wouldn't have been applicable. So they added this in here saying, tell you what, I'm going to allow you to add these together in order to achieve the 1200 minimum or greater. And I'm going to let you add their width together to achieve this 6 feet or more in order to trigger the entrance and egress at each end of the working space. Make sense? So that's what applies here. It says, for service disconnecting means installed in accordance with 230.71, and that's that grouping requirement, it says where the combined ampere rating, so that means if I had 2 800 amp switchgear that was service disconnecting means, that's 800, that's 1600. That obviously is 1200 amps or more. Not a problem there. Collectively, they would be over 6 feet wide. If that's the case, then the main rule kicks in and I have to have at least one entrance and egress at each end of the working space. And it has to be 24 inches wide and 6.5 feet tall. You with me? Now, it also goes on in the 2020 code to add this little sentence here after that. It says, okay, open equipment doors shall not impede the entry to or egress from the working space. So the equipment that when it opens its doors, if it has front access, for example, it opens a door, it cannot open that would impede the ability for me to get from that working space out of that room. If opening the doors does that, then that's not going to be acceptable. Now, you would either make the room deeper, bigger, in order to allow you to get around this, to get around the open door, to move around the workspace, to get around it, to get to the egress or exit, then that's okay if you did that and make a bigger room. But everybody's making smaller rooms. So the key here is you can't have the ability to open a door and block the ability to get out of that room. Absolutely would be a no-no. So that's why that's added there. Now, as you probably know, it does have some allowances here for a single enclosure. Even if you are large equipment, is allowance here. It says a single enclosure to and egress from the required working space shall be permitted where either of the conditions in 110.26 C2A or C2B are met. So this is some caveats to say, well, I don't need an entrance and exit at each end of the working space if I meet these conditions. The first one says unobstructed egress. So this one says where the location permits a continuous unobstructed way to egress travel, a single entrance to the working space shall be permitted. So if you think of a square room and you're thinking just a box, sitting in front of you, a box, just kind of look down and picture a box. If the equipment is on the side of the box that's closest to you, then that's where the equipment is, and the exit is on the side that's farthest from you, okay, I'm again looking down at a box, then if the path of travel from that gear straight out that room is unobstructed, then you don't have to worry about it, then you're okay. Then you don't have any obstruction. You can leave right out of that working space, right out of the room, and you're okay. Still going to have your 3 feet, by the way, but you can leave out of the room. That's not a problem. Okay, what's the next one say? Well, the next one says extra working space. So this one says, look, where the depth of the working space is twice that's required by 110.26A1. Remember, we said it was 3 feet. So let's say the depth of the working space is 6 feet now. In other words, you have that much room in this room to get you double the working space. And then here's what it says. A single entrance shall be permitted, permissive rule. It shall be located such that the distance from the equipment to the nearest edge of the entrance is not less than the minimum clear distance specified in table 110.26A1 for equipment operating at the voltage and in that condition. So if you had double the distance, so it's 3 feet working space and you had 6 feet, but now you had one door, and that door was at least 3 feet away from the edge of that working space, then that would allow you to maneuver around the working space and give you that 3 foot clearance. It allows you to get to the exit and leave. And the only way you could achieve that is because you had double the space. And that would allow you to get around the actual 3 foot working space. So remember, double the space is just doubling the size of that 3 feet to 6 feet. It's still 3 feet working clearance, but it doubles it in order you to use this exception, or I shouldn't say exception, this allowance to have a single instead of doors at each end, or let's say entrance and egress at each end of the workspace. This allows you to have the one. As long as from the edge of that workspace, and remember what we said it is, the actual workspace is 3 feet out from the equipment, right? And the width of the equipment. As long as that door is 3 feet away from the edge of that original working clearance, then you're okay. Okay? All right. So that's the rule that we have for that one. All right. So I think that's it. Pretty good today. Hopefully I didn't confuse you. Podcasts can do that sometimes. And again, if I didn't do a good job of conveying it, I apologize. There's others that can do it better than me, I'm sure. So I seek them out. But if you got something from it, I appreciate you listening. If you disagree with me, then prove me wrong. Go ahead and go to Ask Paul at the paulabernathy.com and type it in there and show me where I'm wrong. I'd love to hear from you. Other than that, I did my best to try to convey it to you. You can always reach out if you need additional clarification. Until then, till next time, take care, stay safe. And again, check us out at electricalcodeacademy.net.com or .org for all your electrical code training and education. If you have a company with multiple employees, we'd love to get you on one of our corporate plans and get you in there and get you all learning whatever cycle you want. And we can teach you the code. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless.